Hello, good evening, welcome to My Planet Rocks. My guest this week is a guitarist and songwriter who has been with this band for over 50 years, on and off. From Yes, it's Steve Howe. It's My Planet Rocks. My guest this week is the member of Yes, not a member, the member, Steve Howe. Welcome back.
Hello there. Thank you very much. Nice to be back.
So you joined the band in 1970 at a time where sort of prog was sort of just developed. It was in its infancy. You know, the likes of King Crimson and Genesis were sort of just starting out and making waves. What did you think of the music scene then? Because this thing that we now know as prog was, it was undefined at that point, wasn't it?
Well, it was. I mean, I've always, kind of had my own explanation is that, psychedelia was a very powerful, exciting summer of love in 1967. But come 1970, there was still a clutch of us who were still kind of unidentified hippies kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what prog is. It's the non-conformist. Somebody tells you, oh, you've got to have another verse here. You kind of say, well, like, yeah, but that's a pop record. We don't make pop records. We make prog records. We don't comply by the rules. So the rules got thrown out. The influences were just vast. And that's how you got Yes and the like of ELP and all the other bands.
Is this an internet myth, or is there any truth in this? Did you once audition or come close to auditioning for Jethro Tull before you joined Yes?
That's right. I had a bit of a bout running with various people who were looking for guitarists, because Abrams, was it Abrams, the guitarist with Jethro Tull? Anyway, yeah. I got an invitation to come, but, and I presumably had a conversation with somebody, and then it went very bad when they said, we don't want your songs. We want a guitarist, but we don't want your songs. And I thought, well, I'm just heading into that area where my songs and my music, rather, I want that to be part of my future. And so that's why I declined at the time.
You mentioned flower power, psychedelia. You've chosen for many the ultimate psychedelic band in the Beatles, and you've gone for a non-obvious one, I'm Only Sleeping. Why this one?
Well, I guess what that song, I wouldn't say it signifies an enormous amount, personally, but I think as an album, you got Rubber Soul and you got Revolver and you got Sgt. Pepper. It's the kind of the motion they were going through. But I think there's backward guitar in it, but it's a nice kind of sleepy, stony kind of track.
The Beatles and I'm Only Sleeping on My Planet Rocks. Here on Planet Rock, my guest this week, Steve Howe. You were saying earlier about how when you're in a prog band, it's a case, well, I don't want to do 3-minute songs with the chorus because that's essentially the foundation of a pop song. Having said that, on the flip side, at any point, did you feel you had to almost deliberately do these epics and throw things in that would confuse or surprise people?
No, I think it was our goal to, as we've already said, not conform and not have another verse after the second chorus, that kind of predictable stuff. We threw all that out. Actually, we decommercialized music quite often. And part of the skill of Yes wasn't so much the writing or the actual, ability to play, but it was also the arranging collaboration where somebody would say, oh, it'd be a good idea if we went here. And somebody else would say, well, yeah, but how about if we went there? So there was a kind of collaboration in arrangement that most probably I haven't seen so greatly in other bands.
We won't go too far into the Yes family tree because it's a rabbit hole that confuses probably even the members and the former members of Yes. But 1980, just before age, why did you leave? Or what happened? What made you think, oh, okay, I've got to move on and do something else?
Well, look, Drama was a sensational album to make. Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes joined us, and we kind of rocked into this thing that was really did have a lot of references to the sort of heavier side of rock music. And I guess when that had toured and we'd done that, and Trevor said, well, I'm going to make another Buggles album, and Chris and Alan had some crazy ideas about other rock stars they were going to play with. That 1981 started with like no Yes really, but me and Jeff could have carried on Yes there, but I was actually sick of trying to keep a band together with ever-changing members. Just when everybody was happy, somebody would say, "Oh, I want to leave," or
yeah,
it got kind of annoying. So that's when I thought, well, I can see Yes dissolving in front of my eyes. So what's the best thing to do? And at that time, there was little experience of reforming bands, reigniting some band that you used to be in. So the only way forwards was a new band. So Asia just kind of got formed out of that embryo. John and I jamming, and I could see what kind of bass player he was. He was phenomenal, and we were rushing up the charts with Heat of the Moment, which was unlike Yes in a lot of ways. It did have a verse after the second chorus.
Yeah.
It did have some of the sort of like regular sort of arrangements, and that was the way we started the 80s. We didn't know at the time that it was going to be in competition at all in Yes, if it was in any way. But basically, we were Asia, they were Yes, they were getting on with it, we were getting on with it.
Before we talk about Asia through the 80s, it's a Yes track, which came out a couple of years, 2 or 3 years before you sort of did your Asia thing. I mean, it's an absolute anthem from the 70s from Yes. Going for the One, obviously from the album of the same name. I mean, you could have picked any number of tracks. What is it about this one you like?
Going for the One, I threw the intro on it, and we had a bit of a theme. But in the most part, that was a song about the kind of sporting life, if you like. But what it had was a stomping approach, and the steel guitar just, because I was never big on finger vibrato on a guitar, but give me a steel and, you get some vibratos then.
Yeah.
And a lot of sliding around, because my influences were Speedy West. So in a way, although it's nothing like Speedy West, I kind of rocked out and found a sort of slightly dirty steel sound. And, I really like that track.
Yes, going for the One from my guest, Steve Howe of the band Yes, here on My Planet Rocks. And there'll be more from Steve in a couple of minutes. Asia and One Step Closer from the album of the same name. It's My Planet Rocks. My guest this week is Steve Howe. One of my favourite Yes albums, and I always get a few funny looks, is the Union album. In fact, it was after hearing Going for the One and Owner of a Lonely Heart, that was the first Yes album it was given to me, and someone said, listen to this. This was about 1990, and I really liked it, but I didn't know the story at the time. But looking back, it was a disjointed merging of different members at different times. What's the story? I mean, that's essentially when you went back. So how did that come about, and why was it such a mixed bag of literal people?
Well, yeah. I mean, there could have or should have been more people. We got to 8 through agreement, but a few of us had said, no, let's get Tony Kaye, let's have this guy. But so that album was a nightmare. I mean, in a way, there was a pattern going to start here where albums got harder and harder to make, and the people who had control maybe abused it a little bit, but the people behind it, they were very keen that this was a great opportunity. So yeah, the album was not to everybody's satisfaction in the way that it was mixed and finalized, and certain ingredients like my vocals were tremendously ignored. They were like, in the bin, But it was also a very homogenized, kind of a record. Had a lot of people trying to do a lot of things, and not all of them could come through at once.
Did you do the tour, or was it just the album in 91 and 92?
The tour went on and on for ages. We did, I think, 2 or 3 legs of America. We did Japan and Spain, I think, later at the very edge. But when we went to the UK and did Europe, funny enough, there was an awful lot of smartening up came along when we got to the UK, because people who were less disciplined than some of us got disciplined, And I think that was the beautiful threat about the knowledge, the ears the Brits have. It made them stand up and pay attention and kind of not cross the line too much, because there was a fair bit of, spotlight stealing, and we thought that there'd be different phases of the show where we get a chance to exploit different lineups. But the fact that the other guys didn't want to get off the stage the whole night,
right?
Every song had this overladen live version, with people twiddling and noodling around, and really that did spoil it. But the only thing I will say is, irrespective of what we actually played on stage, people loved it, and you can't knock that, or you can't knock them for doing that.
You've chosen another solo track, this one from one of your 90s albums, Walk Don't Run, from the Quantum Guitar album in 98. Why this one?
That's a tune that just about every guitarist has tried to play, because in GTR, I was working with Phil Spaulding, the bass player, and he plays a Steinberger bass. And I said, that thing sounds great, but it looks like a cricket bat. And he said, well, have you tried the guitars? And I said, no way, I'm not playing a guitar like that. But eventually they brought out a guitar quite quickly after that. They brought out a guitar. It's quite beautiful, double cutaway. And I played it and I was like, wow, these guitars allow me so much freedom. So basically, Walk Don't Run was one of the first things I released, just tearing about on this Steinberger 6-string guitar. So it was a great guitar. So I just got going with what I added, which was unusual, which you'll hear at the beginning, is the flamenco style rhythm guitar. It's obviously it's not the Wrenches, but it was my interpretation of a rhythm guitar was to make it sort of flamenco.
Walk Don't Run from my guest this week on My Planet Rock, Steve Howe. Speaking of flamenco and that acoustic Spanish guitar, it reminded me of Queen's Innuendo, which I only found out later in life. I was well into I think I was in my 30s when I found out that was you playing it, not Brian May. How did you end up being friends with Freddie Mercury?
Basically, we had a lot of respect for those guys. And so I'm in a restaurant having lunch. Guy walks by called Martin, says, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm, just having lunch and I'm down the road in Geneva. They said, come by the studio. I get to the studio, they play me the whole of the Innuendo album, but they play me Innuendo last. And when it finishes, there's a bit of a silence. And Brian, I think, turned around and said, we'd like you to play on that. And I was like, where do you want me to play? And they played me the bit. And they said, I said, well, look, you don't need another guitarist. Brian, you've done a great job here. So he'd set up this Spanish guitar. And I said, well, I can muck about and see what I can come up with. So we did a few takes, 2 or 3 takes, and we went and had dinner, came back, listened to them, and we took the best and left the rest. And basically, that's how I appeared with the wonderful Queen.
Did you ever do that? I know Queen didn't play live after '86 with Freddie, but have you ever played that solo since?
No, I haven't. No.
Just a one-off.
Brian told me that he kind of hoped to be able to invite me along to the Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley, which I was at. But as it happened, he said, kind of joyfully, that Roger invited everybody he knew on the show, and they had some really big names. So basically, Tony Iommi had already been invited, so they weren't going to go that far. But so I haven't played it on stage.
My guest this week on My Planet Rock, Steve Howe. Now, you must get this a lot on any given week or any given month with Yes fans, because, there'll be those that think that Yes stopped being Yes when John Anderson left. There'll be some that think Yes stopped when Rick Wakeman left or when Chris Squire passed away. Were you always steadfast that whatever happened, you were going to plough on? Or did you have those doubts? You're like, well, maybe we should call it a day and maybe just do something else?
Well, there was a suspicion, there was risks involved going ahead, but basically at the actual point where we were about to go out and play with Chris and he was taken to hospital, Chris agreed with us that most probably Billy Sherwood was our greatest alliance that we'd had over the years. He'd even helped us engineering and mixing on Keys to Ascension before this, and we were getting ready to go out on tour when sadly Chris did pass away, and we had the option to carry on, which is what we did. That was how we managed to steer our way through, with greatest respect for Chris at that time.
Well, for over 50 years, you have been with Yes, in and out of Yes. You've seen it from the inside, you've seen it from the outside, you've probably seen as much, if not more, turmoil than the members of Fleetwood Mac, members leaving, members passing away, and here you are with this new album coming out on the 1st of October. You're into your 8th decade on this planet. What are your ambitions for you as a musician and for Yes going forward, pandemic aside?
Yeah, aside.
Yeah.
What our hopes are, I guess, or what mine are, is to kind of refine how much energy and how much time you devote to things in proportion to their importance. Even though I'm going to be 75 next year, it seems a little bizarre to say, I still love playing solo guitar immensely. And it's most probably the thing that really defines me mostly. And so, you know, I did an album, I think about 2003, called Motif, which was starting to accumulate new recordings of my solo pieces to be able to put them in as a bookends to my guitar world, which is one of my focuses, you know, casually, is Motif Volume 2 will kind of bring the whole solo guitar work into focus in that. So, yeah, I mean, my ambitions are not to only do the same thing. So, you know, other opportunities, other collaborations, even other retrospectives are not out the window. So I think I feel very lucky and very capable by keeping my guitar playing at the highest level I can. It's harder when you're not doing tours, but it's not impossible to do that. And I guess that's what we do, is we keep our hand in, and that's the joy of music.
Well, I wish you all the best and much success with The Quest, which is out on the 1st of October. We will finish with a track from that album. You've gone with The Ice Bridge. Why this one?
Well, it's the only one that's actually available today, generally speaking, because we've given it away on the internet with a video with Roger Dean's artwork kind of moving around in it. And basically, this is the spearhead of the album. This is the starter track, but it's by no means it's not the be all and end all of the album, because there's as I say, there's quite a richness in the album of material and diversity of the writing team ups that we do. But yeah, this is a trucking along song. It sets up the mood. It sets up I guess it sets up the standards that we aspire to now. And, you know, there's plenty of bass on it, and there's some wonderful things that John has felt so free on this album with his singing. And funny enough, doing the record like we did was fairly expedient, although it took a while to do it. It was never done in a rush, and it was never done with the strap. And I wanted to make sure everybody was happy and there was a good atmosphere around it. And I hope this track demonstrates some of those things I've just said.
Final choice there from my guest on this week's My Planet Rocks, Steve Howe of Yes. That's The Ice Bridge from the brand new album The Quest, which is out on my birthday, the 1st of October.